Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And today we have a Kuby knife to check out. I want to give you a little bit of background on these guys before I get into the review itself. But before I do that, I want to ask, anybody here experience any of the internet weirdness that seems to go on sometimes? This knife kind of falls into that category because they sent me a message. I saw the message. I thought tomorrow I will respond. Tomorrow, the message seemingly had completely vanished. And then weeks later, it was back and I was able to find it, no problem. Like 4 weeks later, it was right there as soon as I looked for it. Meanwhile, I hadn't been able to find it for days. So anyway, that's a bit of an aside, but it kind of reminds me that sometimes the internet does these weird things. I'm sure, by the way, that our devices are listening to us. I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with my wife and then grabbed my phone to look up something that we'd just been discussing because, she asked a question I didn't know the answer to, or I said something and I was like, yeah, that reminds me. And it pops up automatically in my Google search and I'm like, something is not right here. The phone is listening. So let me know if you've had that experience down below. And I'd love to hear whatever other internet conspiracies you can come up with. So Kuby, if you've ever wondered why it took me so long to get back to you, that's why. I saw your message. I was like, oh yeah, I should touch base with those guys. And I just couldn't because the message had seemingly vanished completely. So the knife I've got for you here is a knife that... by the way, I didn't know what I was getting. I just said, sure, send me a knife. I'm happy to review it. And generally speaking, that's my policy. If you've got a knife and you want me to take a look at it, I don't mind doing that. As long as, you're okay with me saying, hey, this knife is a piece of junk if it happens to be one. Now, I will say I also try to the best of my ability, remove my personal biases. Like when I'm doing a review, and I'm sure you guys have heard me say this, I'll say this knife is too small for me, but I'm sure there'd be lots of people out there who love it. And I've got to say, this is a knife, as I say, they didn't tell me what model they were sending. They just said, sure, we'll send something out to you. And this was the model they sent. Turns out it's the KU149. I had to, somewhere here on the box, there you go. KU149. It seems to be the budget version of the KU202. I think that's correct. I could be wrong about that, but that's the current theory that I'm working with. And so let's go ahead and take a look at this knife and see what it's kind of got going on here, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. All right. So this, of course, is a G10 liner lock with D2 steel coated blade, and I'm sure this is probably available in different versions. By the way, you can find this on Amazon Canada, so I'll put an Amazon.ca link down in the description box. I couldn't find it anywhere else. So if you happen to just think this is like the greatest knife you've ever seen, you'll have to go to Amazon.ca. I couldn't find it on Amazon.com at all. I couldn't find any Kuby knives on Amazon.com. I don't know why. Maybe, again, it's one of those weird internet conspiracy things that's going on here. So that's what we're dealing with. Kubey 149 black blade, or black coated blade D2 G10 liner lock. Let's go ahead and give you the specs on this guy. So let me move this. Let's see if it looks better when it's out of the way. Yeah, it does. So, by the way, it does come with a microfiber cloth, even their budget versions, and I think this one was like 49 bucks on Amazon, so it's probably 35 or 40 bucks US if you can find it at a US retailer, which I could not. So 8.5 inches overall, 3 11/16 on the blade length, 4 7/8 on the handle length. Now the grip area is pretty generous here, 3 15/16, which is basically 4 inches, like it's right there. And it weighs in at 4.2 ounces, which is not too heavy at all. All right, I'm sure you'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about with size here when we get to the comparison portion of the video. There is the lock side, by the way. This is, normally we think of this as show side and this as lock side. Some of you have commented before that I tend to show the show side more than the other in my videos, so I'm trying to pay attention to that. I can't make any promises that I'll make any drastic changes, but I will try to be aware. Okay, so what have we got for the blade here? The blade is a black coated D2 blade, and I will say I don't mind the coating on D2 because it's going to help it to be a little more corrosion resistant. Generally, I like satin blades better than coated blades. but it's not the worst thing ever. You can see the blade shape here is a bit of a Persian style upswept blade, slight recurve here. Now it's a very slight recurve, and I suspect even if you have sharpening stones, you could probably sharpen this on stones. Take a look here at the plunge grind. You can see they've done, they've done a pretty decent job of giving me room to sharpen this knife. All right, and the blade stock itself is moderately thick. Now, the only sort of potential issue, focus, come on, there we go. The only potential issue that does create is you end up with quite an abrupt change from a very thin edge, which I will give them credit for. They've got a nice thin edge here to a fairly thick blade. Because of the narrowness of this, it's not going to slice amazingly well. But I have actually, whenever I get a knife that I'm afraid isn't going to slice well, I go ahead and do some food prep with it. Because I find food prep, if you're cutting cardboard, almost any knife will cut cardboard pretty well. Almost any knife will carve wood pretty well, unless the edge here, the angle is way too obtuse. But food prep kind of tells you how well a knife slices, and this one actually performed pretty well. So I can't, although it doesn't look like a blade that would slice super well, it actually worked okay. And the D2 has held an edge as you would expect D2 to do. So I have no real complaints in terms of edge retention or in terms of cutting power. It cuts pretty well. Now, I'm not in love with the blade shape overall. I tend to be a bit of a sucker for drop point blades, but there's really nothing in terms of performance that I can take away. And that may be a little bit of a theme of this video. I don't find this to be the most visually attractive knife that I have ever experienced. It's certainly not terrible. I don't think it's ugly either, but I will say this, as I assess this for, as I use this knife and get a feel for it, the quality is quite nice. And so that tells me, hey, if Kuby's able to make a good knife, then it doesn't really matter whether I like this particular design, because eventually, right, they're going to make a knife that I do like. And I think I would compare Bestech, another overseas sort of budget-ish company. Bestech has a lot of knives that I find really, really ugly. But their quality seems to be very consistent, and therefore I know when they do eventually make a design that I like, and they've had a few that I've really liked, including the Bestech Horus, which I believe, oh yeah, it is. So I've got the Bestech Horus in my pocket right now, and that's a design I do like, along with the Paladin. And I think Kuby would be in a similar vein. While I'm not in love with this particular design, the quality is definitely there. So that's the blade. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the lockup and deployment. So flipper, on bearings, liner lock, and I've got to say, guys, this is quite pleasant. The detent is really dialed in. It's not uncomfortable, but it's stiff enough that it deploys quickly and with a lot of snap. The liner lock is easy to access. It's comfortable on your fingers, right? All the things that I kind of look for. Lockup is rock solid, no blade play in any direction. And again, I'm forced to point out, at $50, when you're able to give me that very solid lockup, that really brings into question any knife that costs, 70 or 80 or something like that, that has some blade play. So lockup and deployment is quite good. It's not the smoothest budget knife I've felt. I would say my Bestech Paladin, which you guys remember I absolutely loved, was a little bit better. All right. But it probably costs a little bit more. I think the Paladin goes for, I don't know, $55 US, where this is probably, these are 49 Canadian, which means they're probably 35, $40 US. But lockup and deployment is quite good. I'm very, very happy with that. Let's move on now to the handle. And we got to talk about the ergonomics here and about the overall construction. And I think, again, they've done a good job. Now, it is... Hold on, let me take this off camera for 1 second. Yeah, looks to be a single position clip, but it's possible you could move it. I suspect this is milled out. So I will say I've got to give some credit for one really standout point on this handle, and that is the pocket clip. So the way they've done this clip is to mill it, but then they've also rounded it really nicely. So it's not just a plain spring clip, and the way they've contoured it makes it very comfortable. And I think there's a real, that's a note that other companies should really take. Kuby has done a really good job of contouring this to kind of match the contours of the handle and made this very, very comfortable in hand. So the pocket clip has no hot spots whatsoever. In fact, it's quite good. Now, in terms of feel in hand overall, it's also quite comfortable. The only issue I do have is I like that ability to be able to choke up a bit, and it's not bad here. I would have, they've done a fairly large sharpening choil here. I would have liked to see this big enough for a finger choil. It would only be another, 1/8 of an inch. Or you could even, bring this back just a little bit, and you could probably get my finger to fit right here just by sort of reprofiling that flipper a little bit. So ergonomically, it's quite comfortable in hand, very good in reverse grip. Draw cut, not so much, but I honestly don't know when I've ever used a knife holding it in this grip. Probably 99.9% of my use on a knife is going to be just like this or in a hammer grip, and in both of those, this is quite comfortable. What else did I want to point out here along the lines of the handle? Oh, contour G10, very nice. Okay, and again, when a contoured handle makes a significant difference in terms of comfort, and so this one again has done a really good job. Overall quality, fit and finish is quite good. And so let's go ahead and get to some comparisons. Remember, I already mentioned the price, like $49 US. So kind of keep that in mind as we look at some other stuff here that's going to be more and less. So this is the Bird Raven 2. You guys know I love this knife. Every time I show it, I get a few comments that people just don't like it. And I will say, yes, this is not the most efficient knife. I would love it if they just slightly reconfigured this to give me another 1/4 inch of blade, or even if they extended this tip just a little bit or went both ways, really would be awesome. So yeah, I readily admit that this knife does not have a ton of blade for its size, but I find it extremely comfortable in hand. I love the thickness of the blade stock. The BD1 steel holds an edge really well, especially for anything you're going to compare to this in its price point, which is like $42, and I'm pretty sure it's like 40 some dollars Canadian. Okay, so I don't know what they go for US, but that's a really, really good price point for a great knife. Let's see here. We've got a couple of Real Steels. Here is the Real Steel G3 Puko, which is a stainless steel knife. I think these are available these days in G10, and that's a really cool design with a fantastically smooth action. I wonder if someone could confirm for me down below. One of the things I love about this knife is it's on roller bearings, and it feels amazing. Now, I don't know if the current versions or the G10 versions are on roller bearings or not. While we're talking about Real Steel, let's grab the Real Steel Control. This, of course, is the White Mountain Knives exclusive version. And you can always go to White Mountain Knives and use my discount code to pick one of these up. Great knife, very hard use, very heavy duty, kind of a cool blade shape. Both of these, though, are going to be a little more. I think both of these probably go for around 50, 60 bucks. This one I know for sure is like $53, and I think this one's probably closer to 60. So you are going to be paying a little higher price tag. While we're talking about price and price comparisons, I guess you want to consider there are a number of Gonzo knives out there, especially their own designs are all I would feel comfortable promoting. This is the FH11, and it goes for like $23, especially if you go back and watch my review and use the discount code that's there. Let's see, what do we got here? Civivi Statera. Again, similar design, similar steel, slightly nicer action. Steel Will Lanner, again, very similar materials, similar construction, same steel, on washers instead of bearings, which makes it maybe a little more, well, and also the blade is a little more hefty, so probably a slightly harder use knife. And of course, last but not least, when we're talking about budget liner locks in D2, you pretty much have to bring in the Rat Model 1, which is a standard for good reason. Okay, so there you go, guys. Those are some comparisons for you. A number of those I know will be well known to you, so you should have also a good idea of how this measures up in terms of size. Now, my overall thoughts on this knife is I'm actually pretty impressed. Now, I'm not in love with this particular design, and really, I've looked at the Kuby knives, the other offerings they have, and none of them really get me too excited from a design standpoint, but I have to give a lot of credit here because the quality that they have delivered is quite nice. And so whatever else I can say about this knife, in terms of actually carrying it and using it for cutting stuff, it works, okay? And the quality is quite good, especially for the price point, which is, as I say, 49 bucks Canadian on Amazon. And if you guys know where else to pick these up, you can go ahead and comment with that. I only found them on Amazon.ca, so that's Amazon Canada. All right, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.